Hi Quilty friends, Christine here from the Quilter's Retreat, and welcome back to another episode of our Quilter Tech series. Today we're doing something I love because it's fast, it's beautiful, and it makes you look like a quilting wizard. We're going to take a fabric panel, that beautiful centerpiece design that you see in many quilts these days, and we're going to bring it into Electric Quilt 8, that's EQ8, and we are going to build a panel fabric pattern around it. And yes, this is absolutely beginner friendly. I've been using EQ8 for years. It's what I use to design my quilts, and I'm going to walk you through the process step by step.
Quilter Tech, Quilter Tech, Quilter Tech, stitching smart, stitching bright.
So here's what we're going to do in the first video. I'm going to walk you through how to create a new project in EQ8. We're going to bring in the image that represents our center panel. I'll show you how to do that with image files. We can then build borders around it to create a very custom perfect quilt pattern just for our panel. In addition to that, I'll take you that next step further and show you how you can create borders that contain blocks. That's a lot of the quilting patterns that we make here at the Quilter's Retreat. They're a very simple way to bring together a quilt around a beautiful centerpiece panel and still be able to get all of the color and texture that we love in our beautiful pieced quilts. Finally, I'll show you how to bring in your own fabrics and be able to use your EQ8 project to tell you how to cut your fabrics and how much yardage you'll ultimately need. And in the end, I'll give you a sneak peek of the next video where I'm going to walk you through how to use Custom Set to create a fabric pattern for a panel quilt. It is a beautiful way to add a lot more flexibility to what you can create in your quilt. It's a bit more complicated, but it's worth it.
Quilter Tech, Quilter Tech.
At the Quilter's Retreat, we carry a growing collection of beautiful fabric panels, bold, beautiful designs that you can use in your quilt. And if you've ever thought, I wish I could make my very own custom quilt panel, we show you how to do that in the earlier videos of this series. I walk you through how you can use your own art or a family photograph or even AI generated art to make your very own fabric panel for your quilt using spoonflower. I'll link those in the description so they're there when you're ready to check them out.
Quilter Tech, Quilter Tech.
Now, if you're new to EQ8, it is a quilt design software that runs on your Windows or your Mac machine, and it helps you design quilt patterns. Think of it as a design table where you can lay out different patterns, different fabrics, different designs and blocks and borders, and design the perfect pattern for what you're looking for in your quilt, even before you cut a single piece of fabric. As of now, Electric Quilt is about $239, I think, on their website, and that buys you 2 activations. You can use it on 2 of your computers at the same time. They don't appear to currently have a downloadable free trial, but there's lots of demo videos that you can watch. You can watch this one here, and there's other videos on YouTube that you can watch so you can get familiar with the product. Either way, we're going to walk you through step by step how to do it so you can see if this is something you're interested in doing.
Quilter Tech, Quilter Tech.
All right, now we are in EQ8, and if yours looks a little different than mine, don't worry. EQ8 remembers what you were doing last, so yours may be set up a little bit different. So the first thing we're going to do is to create a new project. We're going to go to File, New Project, and let's name it something we'll remember, like Panel Borders Quilt Pattern. And now we're going to go up to File, and we're going to choose Save the Project. Now, this is something you're going to want to get into the habit of doing. Save early, save often. And that way you never have to worry about losing your work.
Quilter Tech, Quilter Tech.
Now, the first thing we're going to do is bring in our panel image into EQ8. We're going to do that through Image Worktable. We will be able to see that we can choose to import an image. Now, hopefully before you started, you put an image on your computer of the panel that you want to use. You can typically go to the manufacturer's website, go find the little picture that they have on their website, maybe download it. Of course, you can't use that for commercial purposes, but for the purposes of being able to create your design in EQ8, it's perfectly fine. So we are now going to go to import image. We're going to go find our quilt panel image on our desktop. Here it is. And then we're going to choose open. And it may tell us that it's going to change the dots per inch. That's fine, especially if you have a very large image. Now, if this shows up rotated, don't worry. There's a button here saying rotate, where you can orient it to the correct angle for your quilt. And you can also choose fit to window. There it is. And then it will help you see the whole design. Now, once you have your image, if it's a very large image like I've just brought in, you will probably want to resize that. So you can go to resize image and then pick a reasonable width and height. I usually make it the size of the actual panel if I can, or something close. As long as it's reasonably close, you'll be fine. Our measurements will be very precise when we go in to start creating our quilt. Okay. Now that you have your design the way you want it, the next thing you're going to do is add it to your sketchbook by clicking this plus sign up here. Click that. You may hear a cute little sound in the background. That's telling you that it's been added to your sketchbook. There. And that's all there is to putting your image inside of EQ8 so that you can use it for a panel quilt. Now, we haven't talked much about Sketchbook, but that's essentially where you're keeping all the elements that you'll put in your quilt, including designs that you make for finished quilts. So if you click here on the little eyeglasses icon that shows you your sketchbook, you can then go through that and see what you have in place. Now, if you look in your photos section, you will see the image that you've added to your sketchbook that you want to use in your quilt. Now let's make the quilt. So in order to do that, the first thing we're going to do is go back up to work table. And this time we're going to choose quilt work table. That's the next work table we want to work on. And once we select that, you'll see there are a number of different quilt options here at the top. You can make horizontal, you can make diagonal or on point. We're going to start with a horizontal design for our quilt. Now, our quilt is essentially one big block. It's going to start with our quilt panel in the center, and then we're going to add borders around that. So we're going to modify these two settings up here to set the number of horizontal blocks to 1 and the number of vertical blocks to 1. So you basically have one block right in the center of the quilt. There. Now, the next thing we want to do is make sure it's the right size. Now, this is where it really matters that you measured your panel. You want to be able to put the finished dimensions that you can get from your panel into that particular portion of the screen, because that is going to be the one that ultimately decides the final dimensions of your finished quilt. If your panel is a little too big, it's fine. You can trim it. If the panel's a little too small, you can always add borders. But for now, let's start with what the actual finished panel is. So now that we have added our one block, and you can see it automatically adds one border, that's 1 inch. That's fine. For our purposes, we're just gonna take a look at now our quilt in the design tab. Doesn't look like much of anything, but right now it looks like it is our quilt panel surrounded by a 1 inch border. And that's where we're going to start as we move into the next phase. We're going to place the image for our fabric panel in our new quilt pattern. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to go to design, photo tools. In there, we should see the artwork for our fabric panel. We're simply going to click on it and drag it to the center pane. That's right in the center of there, and then let go of our mouse and drop it right in. So now you can see we have an image of our fabric panel inside our quilt design. Right now it's simple. It only has a narrow border, but we're going to add to it in the next segment.
Quilter Tech. Quilter Tech.
Now we have our quilt panel and we have the default 1 inch border that they gave us. Now we're going to change that up. Now, actually, a 1-inch border around a quilt panel is a really great idea. And I think most of the quilt pattern designers that are working with a panel quilt usually have a thin border around the quilt panel, breaks it up from the rest of the quilt, and really kind of makes it pop. And so we're going to keep that 1-inch border around it. You can certainly change the size. You can make it smaller or larger. We'll go through that in a minute. But we're at least going to keep that 1-inch border. And now the next thing I'm going to do is add another border. Now you can see there's a bunch of different types of borders that you can add. We're going to get into some of those a little bit later. But for now, we're going to use a simple long horizontal border. And that long horizontal border is pretty standard in quilt patterns. You can certainly do miters if you like. That's an option as well. We're going to stick with something simple, which is a long horizontal border. Now, you can see up here, you have 3 buttons. You can add borders, you can delete a border, or you can insert a border. Now, when you are working with any of these, it's important which of your borders is selected. You can see the border that's gray is the one that's selected. And as I click some of these buttons, it's either going to add it to the outside or it's going to insert it between the border that I have selected and the one beyond it. So play around with those buttons a little bit, make sure you understand kind of what borders are being added or removed, and then you're ready to add your next border. Now, with my default border highlighted, I'm going to go ahead and add a border around, and I will do that by choosing the insert button. That will put another border just outside of the one that I have highlighted. And you can see now there is another border that's available on the quilt design that I can use. And I can change the size of that border. And the way I can do that, you can see I have some options here. One of this checked option means that if I change one of the dimensions, it will change all 4. But I can also uncheck all of these kind of locks, and I can change every single border to a different size. If that's interesting and helpful, that may be something you want to do. For now, I'm going to put it on all so that every single one of my borders is the same regardless of what number I enter. And in my case, I'm going to go ahead and make this a 5-inch border. Now we're going to keep it reasonably simple. I'm going to go ahead and add a 3-inch border in between my 1-inch and my 5-inch. And that way my quilt design has the fabric panel, a 1-inch border, a 3-inch border around that, and finally a 5-inch outer border. Now that's the one we'll use for our example, but of course you should make it the way you like it in your quilt design. Okay, so now that our borders are in place, I'm going to show you how to add fabrics. We're not going to add your fabrics yet. We're going to go ahead and work with the fabrics and the colors that are already available in EQ8. And you can do a lot with this already. So now if you move to the Design tab, to the Fabric Tools, you can see there's a lot of different predefined fabrics that are available in new projects. And with each one, you can click on the fabric and you can click on a part of your quilt that you want to change to that fabric, and it will automatically change. So I'm just clicking around the outside border and you can see that fabric is being added. And I can choose a different color for another border and let me add that. Now I can also hold down my control key and click on one of those sides of the border, and it's going to fill all 4 of them. So that's a nice way to use a shortcut, and so you don't have to click each one. I'm going to do that again with my center border. Again, I'm picking some colors at random, and you can pick different colors or change them up however you like, whatever fits your fabric panel. But for now, I'm just showing you how to use the functionality. And the purpose of this is that you experiment. Try different things. This is where you get to audition colors, audition fabrics to go with your fabric panel until you get exactly what you're looking for, long before you ever start buying or cutting fabric. Now, I could do this all day long, but for now, let's just stop here. And I'm going to show you now some other ways in which you can choose colors for your fabric. And that is the Color tab. Now, the Color tab, these are not fabrics, they're just flat colors. but it gives you an idea of what are the kinds of colors you're looking for when you go to the fabric store, because that, the color may really pop with your panel. So same thing, you're going to go and select something. If you hold down the control key and click one of the borders, it will color all of the borders or all of that border. And you can, again, just keep doing this with colors you want to try out. And that will give you an opportunity to try a bunch of different things and see which one is really the one that you want. A little bit later, I'll show you how you can print this out, take it to your fabric store, and go pick out fabrics that are in that same color area that you chose so you can get the exact look that you're looking for.
Quilter Tech. Quilter Tech.
So now I'm going to show you how you can use EQ8 to show you how much yardage you're going to need and even show you cutting diagrams for your quilt. I'll show you the basics now because we just have simple borders. And when we move on to do the block border, I'll show you how that provides you with the yardage and cutting instructions you need for the blocks. So once we have a quilt that we are interested in doing and we need the yardage, we're going to go to the print and export menu option in EQ8, and we're going to choose print, and you can see there's an option for yardage. And so if you choose that and then choose preview, this will show you right on the screen. Of course, you can print it. You'll have that as something you can bring to the fabric store with you. But for now, I'm just going to put it on the screen by using that preview function so that you can see the different yardage requirements we have for this quilt that we've designed. And this will show you images of the fabric, so it's easy to identify how many pieces you're going to need to cut and the yardage. And if you did choose the fabric samples used by EQ8, you'll also see the name of the fabric if you want to go get that exact one. Now, the other thing you can do, we'll cancel this, is you can actually click on one of the pieces of your quilt, one of the blocks. In this case, the block is this piece of border. And then you can go into this section called rotary cutting. And again, I'm just going to choose preview. So I'm going to show you what it will provide you if you print it. You can see there's a lot of different options to set here. But essentially what this shows you is how you need to cut that piece. And even though we saw that as finished size in the rotary cutting instructions, it will give you the unfinished size. So you know you're cutting it at exactly the right point. Similarly, for this border, I'm going to go through and it's going to show you exactly what you need to cut. So again, this is a very simple quilt, and the purpose of this is just to kind of show you the basics of how you can use this functionality. It'll be more interesting when we do this with our quilt borders that have blocks in them. The next thing I want to show you is that you can actually print your quilt image. And that's something, again, you can bring to the fabric store with you along with your yardage requirements, and that will help you pick out your fabrics and see or show your friends kind of what it looks like. There's also a way, going back to this dialogue, where you can take the fabrics out and just print that outline diagram. That can sometimes be helpful if you want to print it out and write maybe the measurements in each one if you're doing your quilt that way. And so this is another way that you can print it out and give you something to work with.
Quilter Tech. Quilter Tech.
So the next thing I'm going to show you is how to add your own fabrics to EQ8. Now, you can certainly take a picture of your fabric and bring that into EQ8, but I'm going to show you how you can use the manufacturer's website to go get images from them. Now, we're going to start in this website here. This is the official instructions from EQ8 on how to bring in manufacturer fabrics and bring them into your EQ8. Certainly, you're going to want to do this as all of the new fabrics come out and you want to incorporate them into some of your quilt designs. So as I'm looking at this particular quilt design, I would really love to do this with Hoffman watercolors. I love Hoffman batik watercolors for everything, but I think they would really make this quilt panel pop if we can come up with just the right colors to go with the panel itself. So I'm going to choose Hoffman California International Fabrics. They do have, some of the specific manufacturers here on the right-hand side. I'm going to pick the one for Hoffman. And that will give me specific instructions on how I can typically work with the Hoffman fabric, which include the Hoffman watercolors. And you can see there's a bunch of different options to choose from. you'll want to check out this article. I will include a link in the description below and look up your manufacturer, and that will give you more detail on the best way to work with theirs. If you have a favorite EQ8 tip, something that saves you time or makes designing easier, drop it in the comments below so we can all learn from each other. And if you have a question about anything we're doing today, or if there's a quilting topic you want me to cover in the next Quilter Tech video, tell me that too. I read and respond to every comment, and your ideas really do shape what I make next. So once I've chosen the Hoffman California International Fabrics, it's going to tell me to go to their website. So this is the Hoffman website. I'm going to scroll down and find their 1980 something. It's here. Watercolors. Oh, there it is. And this has over 100 different beautiful batik colors. And of course, all of these look fantastic, but let's go find some that I think will do well with our fabric panel. Now, I've already downloaded a couple, but let me show you how to do it with a couple more. So looking through which ones I think would look really great with my fabric panel, let me check again. This kind of lovely purple or this lovely blue would be good. Oh, how about the purple here on the wings? If we can really bring that out, I think that would make the quilt panel look gorgeous. So let's scroll down and see if we can find some that would look very well to kind of mirror that color that we saw on the wings. And again, there's just hundreds. You can go crazy in here. I like this one. I think this is a good one that goes very well. So I'm going to do what the instructions say. I'm going to click it. And now I got this big image of it. I'm going to bring my cursor over the top of the image, right click, and choose Save Image As, and put it on my file system. These are a couple others that I've downloaded, but you can see it very nicely puts a very informative name for that file. So all I have to do is click Save, and I've got it. Let's go get one more. I know I could do this all day long, but we'll pick one more and I'll show you again how to do that. Oh, this one is gorgeous. Okay, another beautiful purple. Again, right click, Save Image As, and then save. Now it says we are now supposed to go to the image work table. And this is where we have brought in our panel print. But I'm going to say import image. And then I'm going to go find those fabric samples that I downloaded. There it is. Now the instructions for Hoffman specifically said to resize it to 72 dots per inch. Resize. There's the resolution. Let's change it to 72. And this isn't going to change the look of it at all. It's just going to make it smaller, sort of more representative of what you would expect in that fabric. Now we choose Add as Fabric. And we're done. If I now take you back to the sketchbook into the fabric section, you can see there's the fabric that we just added. So each time we add a new fabric, it's going to add it to our sketchbook. You'll see in a minute that it's also going to make it available to us in the fabric section of the design tab. So we're going to do another one. Let's do this again, step by step. Resize image, 72 dots per inch, add as fabric. Now, if we go back to our design tab and we look inside the fabric section, now you can see all of those fabrics that we've added. Click on the fabric that you want, click on where you want it to be added. And again, if you hold down your control key, you'll be able to do all the pieces of that border. And so just go crazy, try different combinations. Do you like the light color on the inside around the panel, or is that a better place for a darker border that's got more punch? There's no wrong answer. It's whatever you decide works best for you.
Quilter Tech. Quilter Tech.
All right, now we're at the part I lovingly call quilt math. In our example, our panel started as a standard yard cut, about 42 inches tall by 36 inches wide. But we're going to trim off the salvages and square it up. So let's say after trimming, the cut size of the panel is 35.5 inches wide by 41.5 inches tall. Now, because we need 1/2 inch as a seam allowance when we sew the panel to the next border, the finished size of our trimmed panel is 35 inches wide, finished, by 41 inches tall, finished. Now, let's say we've fallen in love with a 6-inch finished block for our pieced border. Now we need to figure out how many 6-inch finished blocks fit along the sides and the top and bottom. So, starting with the side borders, let's see how many blocks fit the height. Our panel is 41 inches tall, finished. If we stack 6-inch blocks up the side, 6 blocks would be 36 inches, which is too short, and 7 blocks would be 42 inches, which is too long. But the closest workable target is that 42 inches, which means 7 blocks. But our panel is 41 inches tall, and the blocks want 42 inches. So we're off by an inch. One very common trick in panel quilts is to add a thin inner border, sometimes called a coping border, around the panel. It helps frame the panel, and it's a great place to use a fabric that either blends and make the panel feel bigger or contrasts and make the panel really pop. So let's add a 1-inch finished inner border around the panel. That adds 1 inch to the top and 1 inch to the bottom. So our panel height becomes 41 inches plus 2 inches is 43 inches tall, finished. Now, our 43 inches still isn't a multiple of 6, and our 7 blocks still want 42 inches. So now we're 1 inch too tall. So the second common technique is to trim the panel area slightly so the math works out. Panels are usually designed so you can trim a little from the top, bottom, or sides to square them up or fit a pattern. So we trim 1 inch total from the height, either all from one side or split as a 1/2 inch from the top and a 1/2 inch from the border, depending upon the artwork. Now the panel plus inner border height becomes 43 inches minus 1 inch, which is the 42 inches tall finished that we were looking for. And now it matches perfectly. 7 blocks by 6 inches is 42 inches. So our side borders are solved. Now we do the same with the width. Our panel width is 35 inches finished. But remember, we added a 1-inch border to the left and right too. So the width became 35 inches plus 2 inches, which is 37 inches wide finished. Now let's see how many 6-inch blocks would fit across. 6 blocks would be 36 inches. 7 blocks is 42 inches. So 7 is way too big. So we're going to work with 6 blocks, which gives us 36 inches. But our panel with border width is 37 inches. So we're 1 inch too wide. So we trim that 1 inch total from the width. Again, either from one side or a 1/2 inch from each side if you want the artwork centered. Now the panel plus inner border width becomes 37 minus 1, which is 36 inches wide finished. Now we have a perfect match. 6 blocks times 6 inches is 36 inches. At this point, we can add our cornerstones. These are the corner blocks that connect the side borders and the top and bottom borders. And if we use 6-inch finished cornerstone blocks, everything lines up beautifully and the pieced border becomes one continuous frame around the panel. Then, very often, you'll see panel quilts add one more outer border around the pieced border. That outer border is great for making the quilt larger, or calming down a busy border, or giving the whole quilt a strong finished frame. So here's the recipe you can use for any panel. Step 1, determine your desired block size. So you're going to pick your finished size block that you want to include in your pieced border. Let's say 6 inches. And then for each direction, height and width, you're going to calculate how many blocks fit evenly. So you're going to find the nearest multiple and then make adjustments for even alignment. In short, you can add a coping border or increase an existing inner border. Or if you're long, you can trim a little from the panel area. In our case, we did a little of both. Add cornerstones, and if you want, an outer border, and you're done. And that's it. Quilt math you can absolutely do, even if you haven't done math since high school. Okay, now to make the quilt with the pieced border, we're going to follow the same process that we had done with the simple borders. we're going to go to New Quilt, then choose Horizontal. If you had made changes to your last quilt, as you are starting your new quilt, it will warn you that your quilt is not in the sketchbook, and you can add it to the sketchbook before starting a new one. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to get started with my new quilt. So we would start with the horizontal, then choose layout. And then we want exactly one block for our fabric panel. And just as we did before, we're going to set the size of our fabric panel here. Now, because we did our quilt math, we know that we want the width to be, the finished width to be 34 inches, and we want the finished height to be 40. And that is the section that will hold our trimmed quilt panel. Now, EQ8 always starts with a default 1-inch border, and that is what we see here. To create our pieced border, I'm going to click on it and then choose Add. And now I have a second 1-inch border around the first one. And this is going to be our pieced border. So I'm going to set the size of this to 6 inches. Now again, because I have my lock size adjustment set to all, it's going to change all of the borders at the same time. So there's my 6-inch border. Now, when we create a border, it has defaulted us to a long horizontal border. We are going to change that to a block border by clicking on blocks. Now you can see it started to break it up into blocks. Now we need to tell it how many blocks we need on the sides and on the top and bottom, and we'll do that here. For horizontal, which is the top and bottom, we need 6 blocks. For the vertical, which are the sides, we needed 7 blocks. And our quilt math told us that each of those blocks would now be 6 inches. Before we go any farther, we do want to confirm that. Now, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can use your tape measure if you like. For me, I like to go into print and export and choose the block, and it will tell me the exact size. But in print and export, it will only give you the information on blocks that have fabric in them. And so I will first go to design. I'll pick any color fabric, it doesn't matter which one. And I'm going to hold down the control key and click on one of the blocks. And it's going to fill them all with fabric. For the sake of completion, I'm just going to do the same on one of these cornerstones, and it's going to fill those as well. Now I can go to print and export. I can click on the block, and you can see immediately what the width and height are. Now, you'll want to do that for several, just to make sure that they are all 6-inch blocks. Typically, if it's right on one side, it's going to be right on the other. But I've now confirmed that these are going to be the perfect placements for 6-inch finished blocks in my pieced border. I'll go back to design. I will choose photo tools, find my panel image, and click and drag and drop it right into the center. There it is. Now, because I know we want an outer border, I'll do that now. We'll go to borders. I'll choose the current outer border. I'll choose add, and this will create another final border. And I will set the width to, I don't know, let's say 3 inches. Go back to design, fabric tools, give it some fabric, and we're done.
Quilter Tech.
I want to take a quick break to show you some of the fun things we have over at the Quilters Retreat store. Because if you love quilting as much as I do, you're going to find something here that makes you smile. We've got a whole line of quilting themed t-shirts, soft, comfy, and made for quilters who aren't afraid to show their stitching spirit. They make great gifts too. We're also adding new fabric panels and quilt kits every month. These are perfect for a weekend project or a heartfelt gift. And for those of you who like to spread quilting joy beyond the sewing room, we've got greeting cards made just for quilters. They're a sweet way to stay connected with your quilting friends. And don't forget our fun quilty mugs. So if you'd like to treat yourself or find the perfect gift for your favorite quilter, come visit us at the Quilters Retreat. Now, let's get back to designing your quilt panels.
Okay, so now that we have our pieced border created, we're going to place blocks in it. This is the fun part. So if you go to the Design tab and then choose Block Tools, you will see that your new project already comes preloaded with several well-known blocks. Now you can certainly choose from these if you like, but I'll show you in a minute where you can find others. Now, the way that you would place your block into a space on your piece border is to simply click it and drag into that space, and then the block is placed there. I'll show you in a minute some other ways to add blocks, but first I want to show you that there are many more blocks in EQ8. And the way to find them all is to go to Libraries, Block Library. And in here, you will see literally hundreds of different blocks that you can choose from. Some are standard blocks that we're used to seeing, others are much more complicated. So you can pick whatever block you want to have included in your quilt. And so our blocks are going to be 6-inch finished blocks. So we are looking for blocks that would do well sized as 6 inches. And those are typically 9-patch blocks. So there's 3 rows, 3 columns. Each cell is a 2-inch or 2.5-inch unfinished piece of fabric. And so that's what we'll be looking for our spaces, which are 6-inch spaces. But I did want to take a moment to just kind of browse and show you all of the different blocks that you can choose from. I won't get to them all, but if you look on the left-hand side, you can see each one of these new categories has its own set of blocks in it so that you do organize them in a way that hopefully makes them easy for you to find. Now I'm going to go up to 9-patch blocks because those are the ones that are going to work well for our 6-inch blocks. And whenever you find one you like, you simply click on it and then choose Add to Sketchbook. That will then add it to your collection of blocks that you can use. Now, I've already selected a few. You can see them here. And now we can place them into the spaces that we've set aside for our pieced border. Now you can click on it and drag it, or you can click on it so that it's selected and then click on the cell where you want it to be. That's another way that you can bring blocks in. Now, there is no end to the different combinations that you can create with different blocks and ultimately the way you color those blocks. But I'm going to speed this up a little bit for this design that I created for the purposes of this demo so that we can talk more about the next step, which is to apply our fabrics. Okay, so now I've got all my block spaces filled in and I can now apply fabrics. So just like we did before, still in the Design tab, we're going to go to Fabric Tools. We're going to find the fabrics that we want to use in our quilt. We're going to select it, and then we're going to select the patch that we want to apply it to. Now, if you're working in blocks and you hold down your Control key and click on one of the patches in that block, it's going to change that patch in all of the same blocks on your quilt. That's typically how you would do it if you were quilting it, so it makes it a bit easier. You don't have to click on every single patch. So I'm holding down the Control key and I'm clicking on patches, and you can see that all of the blocks of that type are now getting that color in that exact patch. And I'm just going to keep doing this. You can see, just like picking out blocks, this is something you could do all day long. And often when I'm designing a new quilt, I do this for hours. I do this for days until I find something that really works for me. You may find you'll do it that long as well. That's okay. It's a lot of fun. But again, the goal here is to try out different fabrics, different blocks, different designs until you find the one that works perfectly, even before you cut a single piece of fabric. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit so you can kind of see different things that I've done. The other thing I want to show you is this swap colors. This is very handy if you put a pink there in all your blocks, but now you don't want it to be pink, you want it to be blue or something like that. You can simply choose swap colors, then choose the fabric you want to have in that piece, and then go choose the piece on your quilt table that you want to have changed colors, and it will change them all. So every time you see that color, it'll be replaced with the new fabric that you've chosen. And that's a great way to make really big changes very quickly. Again, you're going to want to play around with these. This is half of the fun, is being able to experiment with different things in the tool, learn how the tool works, learn all the things it can do for you. There's no wrong answer here. Everything that you do is perfect because it's something that works for you. There. Now, this works for me. I thought this was a beautiful quilt design for that panel. Yours may look entirely different. You may like more white backgrounds, or you may like black backgrounds with bolder colors. There's just a variety of things that you can do here, and there's no wrong answer. Before you do anything else, each time you've created a design that you like, you want to keep it, you want to keep it in your sketchbook, you may go back to it and play with that one a bit more, or you may start with something totally fresh. But each time you want to do that, you're going to click on the sketchbook with the plus icon on it. That will add it to your sketchbook. And now we're going to go into the sketchbook. Now let's see. You can see the different designs that we've made. I didn't save them all, but I saved a couple. And so you can see the old versus the new. And then ultimately, whichever one we want to work with, we select that one, we choose edit, and now we're working within that quilt design.
Quilter Tech. Quilter Tech.
Okay, so now that we have blocks on our quilt pattern, I want to take you back through yardage and cutting instructions. So the process is exactly the same. You're going to go to the print tab and you're going to choose yardage. And I'm going to click preview so we can see it up here on the screen, but you could just print it out to your printer as well. But you can see these are all the different colors that we selected. This is the number of pieces that we might need to cut. And the total amount of yardage the EQ8 thinks we need for this quilt. I'll pause for a second and tell you that this is yardage that is calculated based on the way EQ8 expects you to cut the pieces for your block. And that may not be how you ultimately choose to cut the pieces for your block. For example, when I am making half square triangle units, I don't cut a whole lot of little triangles and sew them together, which is what EQ8 would expect me to do. And that's the yardage that it will give me. And so the yardage it gives me is appropriate for that kind of cut. When I do that, I would always do at least 4 at a time, or 8 at a time, or something like that, at which point my yardage requirements may be different. So use this as a starting point. It definitely gives you something to consider in terms of what it takes to make your blocks, but it may not represent exactly the way you want to make your cuts and your block. And so you may wind up needing more than what EQ8 suggests. So keep that in mind, but it's an excellent starting point. Take it to the fabric store. So now you know at least what you need for your quilt. Now, let's move into the cutting diagram. So if you want to see how EQ8 suggests you cut the fabric for this particular block, you select a block on your print and export tab. In the print section, select a block, and then you will see a bunch of different options that you can choose from. The one we are interested in, again, is rotary cutting. So click on rotary cutting. I will choose preview so that we can see it on the screen. And this is the instructions that it would give you on how to cut this block. And so you can see how many pieces it thinks you need and what those sizes need to be. This is incredibly helpful for those of us that always forget finished versus unfinished. Unfinished requires that extra half an inch. But again, it may not be the way that you choose to cut for that particular type of block.
Quilter Tech. Quilter Tech.
So the last thing I want to show you is how you can share your new quilt design with your friends on social media, or something that you can print out and bring to your next gathering. And the way you would do that, still on the print and export, we're going to start by printing out the quilt, which is always a great place to start. So on the print, you're going to choose quilt.
I'm going to choose showing fabrics. And again, I'll hit preview so you can see it. And there it is. So you can print that out. The other thing is if you want to share it on social media or share a file in an email, you would go to the export button and then choose image. And then you can save this particular image of your quilt as a file on your file system. And now that's available on your file system. You can upload it to social media. You can put it in email and share it with your friends. It's now available to do whatever you want to do with it. Now, I do this a lot because I will make 2 or 3 or 4 different designs for a quilt, and I will send them to my mom in email and ask her opinion so I can get some feedback. Which one does she like or not like? So it's a great way to share your ideas with friends, get some feedback, and ultimately come up with a quilt pattern that you are really going to adore.
Quilter Tech. Quilter Tech.
In our next Quilter Tech video, we're going to level up and use EQ8's custom set feature to build more complex panel quilts. This gives you a lot more flexibility, more control over how blocks, borders, and sections fit together. It's a bit more complicated than what we did today, but the good news is, once you learn it, it's absolutely worth it. So if you want that next step, be sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll know the moment video 2 is out.
And there you have it. That's our first video on how to create quilt patterns using panels and EQ8. Today you learned how to create a new project, to bring the image of your fabric panel into your project, to add borders, even borders with blocks around them, how to export your design, how to print out yardage and cutting information. And you also learned a few things about our store. If this helped you, please like and subscribe and stay tuned for more Quilters Retreat Quilter Tech videos. Thank you for quilting with me today, and until next time, happy stitching!
Quilting every day, quilting.